My aunt kept joking at family events that my baby wasn't my husband's. She turned pale when I reminded her of her own funny secret. Imagine your family being torn apart, not by some devastating secret, but by a single, malicious joke. Now, imagine that joke being told over and over until it poisons your marriage and makes you doubt everything you thought was true about the man you love and the child you created together. When our daughter, Lily, arrived, she was this tiny bundle of joy with a shocking head of bright, fiery red hair. My husband, Daniel, and I? Total opposites. I'm blonde, he's a brunette. But we had family history. My grandmother had red hair, and so did Daniel's grandfather. The pediatrician, bless her, just smiled and said, completely normal. Recessive genes happens all the time. And for a while, everyone just got it. Everyone, that is, except my Aunt Beverly. The first family gathering after Lily was born, she was barely 3 weeks old. Beverly walked right up, took one look at Lily's adorable little red head, and in front of everyone, she declared, "Well, we know what happened here." Then she actually winked. My heart dropped. "What do you mean, Beverly?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She just laughed, this cackling sound, and said, "Red hair doesn't just come from nowhere, does it? Maybe you had some explaining to do." I saw Daniel's jaw clench, a muscle ticking in his cheek, but he stayed silent. My mom immediately jumped in, telling Beverly to stop being ridiculous. Beverly just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm just joking. Can't anyone take a joke anymore?" But she didn't stop. Oh, no. Every single family event became a new platform for Beverly's jokes. At my nephew's birthday, she leaned over to Daniel and asked if he wanted a paternity test for Christmas. Easter rolled around, and she whispered to my cousin that Lily looked just like the mailman. Then, at the 4th of July barbecue, she found me, in front of 15 relatives, and asked if I wanted to confess anything. Each time, she'd follow it with that same hollow laugh. "Just kidding," she'd shriek. But it wasn't a joke. After the third time, Daniel just stopped coming to family events. He looked at me, exhausted, and said he couldn't listen to it anymore. Then, the poison started to spread. My mother-in-law, Kayla, heard about Beverly's jokes from my cousin. Suddenly, she started asking Daniel questions. "Are you sure? Have you considered testing?" She never said these things to me, only to him. Daniel told me she was worried about him being naive. Then his brother, Christopher, started, too. Subtle comments at first, then more direct. "Lily doesn't have your nose, does she, Dan?" Or pointing out she was tall for her age, when both Daniel and I were pretty average. It was insidious. Daniel started looking at Lily differently. Not with suspicion, not yet, but with questions. I'd see him staring at her tiny features during feeding time, comparing her baby photos to his own. One night, I caught him on his phone, looking up DNA testing websites. He quickly closed the browser, mumbling something about ancestry stuff. Beverly, meanwhile, thought she was being hilarious. So, at Thanksgiving, she showed up with a 23andMe kit. She'd wrapped it in baby paper, for God's sake, with a card that read, "For when you're ready for the truth." Then she announced to the entire table what it was. "Every family needs honesty," she declared. That was it. Daniel stood up, his chair scraping loudly across the floor, and just walked out. He left me there, holding our baby, with 20 relatives staring at us, completely stunned. I ran after him, finding him by the car. He was crying, his shoulders shaking. "I hate myself for doubting," he choked out, "but the constant jokes, they're getting to me. Maybe we should just do the test, just to shut everyone up." My heart ached for him, but I stood my ground. "Daniel," I said, "if you need a test after 3 years together and a planned pregnancy, then we have bigger problems than Beverly." We went home, dinner untouched. Beverly, of course, texted me that night. "Daniel's too sensitive," she wrote, "can't handle a little teasing. If you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be so defensive. I didn't respond, but she kept going. She posted old pictures of red-headed actors on Facebook with captions like Lily's real daddy. She tagged me in articles about recessive genes with laughing emojis and comments like, "Sure, John." She even started a group chat with female relatives, asking if anyone else thought it was suspicious. My cousin actually told me Beverly was placing actual bets on when Daniel would leave me. Midway subscribe line, by the way, if you're still hooked on this wild ride, and you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. The breaking point came at Lily's first birthday party. We deliberately only invited close family, making it explicitly clear Beverly wasn't welcome. But she showed up anyway, uninvited, with a gift. And when Lily opened it in front of everyone, it was a onesie that said, "Daddy's maybe" on it. The room went dead silent. Daniel, bless his heart, just scooped up Lily and walked straight to our bedroom, locking the door behind him. Beverly, oblivious or just plain cruel, started laughing again. "You guys need to lighten up. It's a gag gift. Everyone's so uptight these days." That's when I lost it. The dam broke. I turned to her, my voice shaking with a fury I didn't know I possessed. "Beverly," I spat, "you are a miserable woman who destroys relationships for entertainment. Your 3 divorces make perfect sense now. Even your own kids don't talk to you, and everyone knows why." Her smug smile faltered. "Oh, you're being so dramatic," she scoffed. "Over a little joke?" "Your joke," I fired back, "is destroying my marriage." She sneered, "If your marriage is that weak, it deserves to be destroyed." My mom tried to intervene, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I turned to the room, to all those staring faces. "Beverly," I announced, my voice cutting through the silence, "has been spreading rumors for a year. She's been placing bets on my marriage ending. She's made Daniel so paranoid he's looking at DNA tests. This isn't humor. This is cruelty." Beverly tried to bolt, but I followed her to the door. I lowered my voice, but spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you ever contact us again, Beverly, ever make another joke, ever mention my daughter's hair color, I will tell everyone about the money you stole from Grandma's estate." Her face went from red to ghostly white. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, trying to find words, but nothing came out. The living room behind me was absolutely silent. Not a cough, not a shift in weight. Every single relative was frozen, staring, watching this moment unfold. Beverly's hand gripped the doorframe, her knuckles turning white against the wood. She tried to force out that high-pitched laugh she always used after her jokes, but it came out shaky, broken. She waved her hand at me, trying to dismiss me. "Oh, you're being so dramatic over nothing." Her voice cracked on the last word. And she took a step backward onto the front porch. I followed her, stepping outside, and spoke even louder. "We can discuss grandmother's missing $15,000 right here, in front of everyone, if that's what you want." I leaned in slightly. "Would you like to explain how grandmother's signature appeared on checks during the last 6 months of her life, when she couldn't even hold a pen anymore?" Beverly's face went from white to a furious crimson. She shook her head violently, backing down the porch steps. "You're a liar. You're making things up to hurt me." I took another step forward. "I have copies of every single forged check, locked in my safe." She practically ran to her car, fumbling with her keys, dropping them twice before finally getting the door open. Her tires shrieked as she peeled out of the driveway. I watched her taillights disappear down the street before I turned around. My mother was standing right behind me when I walked back inside. She grabbed my arm, pulling me into the kitchen while everyone else pretended not to stare. Mom's face was tight, her voice a harsh whisper. "What are you talking about, the estate money? I leaned against the kitchen counter and told her everything. 2 years ago, when I was cleaning out grandmother's house after she passed, I found a folder of bank statements. Checks written in her last 6 months, all made out to Beverly, totaling over $15,000. I'd seen Grandma try to write her name on a birthday card during that time. Her hands shook so badly, the letters were just scribbles. I'd compared the signatures on those checks to her real signature from before she got sick, and they didn't match. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Why didn't you say anything?" I explained that Grandma had just died. Everyone was heartbroken, fighting over the will. It seemed wrong to add another layer of accusations, of money, when we'd just buried her. I'd kept the copies, just in case, but prayed I'd never need them. Mom closed her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "I believe you," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I'm so sorry you carried that secret alone." When we walked back into the living room, people were already grabbing their things. Nobody looked at me directly. They found reasons to stare at their phones, check on their kids, or remember something they'd forgotten in their car. The whole party cleared out in less than 20 minutes, a flurry of awkward excuses about early mornings and long drives. Scarlett, one of my cousins, was one of the last to leave. She pulled me into a tight hug. "It's about time someone stood up to Beverly," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't say something sooner. I should have told you about the betting pool weeks ago." I hugged her back, telling her I understood. I wasn't mad. She squeezed my hand once more before heading out. The house felt strange and quiet after everyone left. Half-eaten cake on plates, decorations still hanging everywhere. I walked down the hallway to our bedroom and knocked softly. "Everyone's gone," I whispered. "It's just us now." The lock clicked. Daniel opened the door slowly, carefully, as if he didn't want to wake Lily. She was asleep on his shoulder, her tiny hand curled against his neck, her red hair sticking up in every direction. Daniel's eyes were red and puffy, tear tracks on his cheeks. He didn't say anything, just stepped back to let me in, closing the door behind us. We sat on the bed, not touching at first, just watching Lily sleep between us on the blanket. Her chest rose and fell with tiny breaths, little sounds escaping her lips. Daniel and I sat there for what felt like forever, neither of us knowing what to say. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry," he said, "for doubting you. Sorry for letting Beverly's poison get into my head. Sorry for not defending you better to my family." My own eyes welled up. "I'm sorry, too," I told him. "Sorry I let it go on for so long before I fought back. Sorry I didn't shut Beverly down the first time she made a joke." We sat in silence for a few more minutes, then Daniel reached over and took my hand. That night, after we'd put Lily in her crib and turned on her nightlight, Daniel sat on the edge of our bed and told me something that made my stomach drop. He'd actually made an appointment for a DNA test the following week, at a lab downtown. His voice shook, and he couldn't look at me. He felt disgusted with himself, he said, for even considering it. But Beverly's constant comments had burrowed so deep into his head, he couldn't stop the doubts from creeping in. He lay awake at night, looking at Lily's red hair, wondering, hating himself for wondering, but unable to stop. He'd been planning to go alone, he confessed, just to get it done and prove to himself that he was being crazy. I sat down next to him, putting my hand on his back. "I understand why you feel that way," I told him, "and I'm not angry." My voice was soft. "If taking the test would give you peace, and kill the doubts Beverly planted, then we should do it. Together." Daniel's face crumpled. He started crying, really crying, in a way I'd never seen before. He buried his head in his hands, his whole body shaking. He didn't want to be the kind of husband who needed proof, he sobbed. He didn't want to be the kind of father who looked at his daughter and questioned if she was really his. He loved Lily more than anything, he said, and he hated that Beverly had made him doubt something he knew in his heart was true. I held him while he cried, telling him it was okay, that we'd get through this. We talked for another hour, finally deciding to do the DNA test. Not because either of us truly doubted the results, but because we needed to kill Beverly's poison once and for all. We needed something concrete Daniel could look at when the doubts crept in at night. Something that would shut down any future comments from anyone. Daniel got his laptop and ordered a home test kit right there, paying extra for rush processing so we'd get results in 3 to 5 days instead of 2 weeks. We both felt sick about needing to do it, but also incredibly relieved that we'd finally have proof. My phone rang early the next morning while I was making coffee. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but figured I should get it over with. She started talking before I even said hello, her voice tight and angry. Beverly had been blowing up her phone since last night, claiming I was trying to destroy her reputation with lies. Beverly was telling everyone I'd made up the whole estate theft story for revenge. Mom's voice got quiet and serious when she asked, point blank, if the theft was real or if I'd just said it to hurt Beverly. I took a deep breath. Yes, Mom. It's completely real. I have copies of all the forged checks in my safe deposit box. I can show them to you anytime. An hour later, my phone rang again. Dad's name. I picked up, and he didn't even say hello. Why did you never tell me about the theft? He asked, his voice tight, like I'd never heard it before. I explained that grandmother had just died when I found those checks. Everyone was grieving, falling apart. I didn't want to tear the family apart over money when we'd already lost her. The funeral had been hard enough without adding accusations and police reports. Dad was quiet for a minute. I could hear him breathing. Then he said he understood I was trying to protect everyone, but Beverly had been using my silence like a shield to hurt my family for a whole year. He told me he was going to handle Beverly himself now, and I should just focus on fixing things with Daniel. Don't worry about the family drama anymore, he said, I'll take care of it. We hung up, and I sat there, staring at my phone. Part of me felt relieved that Dad believed me and was stepping in. Another part felt guilty for keeping the theft quiet for so long. That afternoon, my phone rang again, and this time it was Kayla, Daniel's mom. My stomach dropped. I figured she was calling to yell at me or defend Beverly. But when I answered, her voice sounded small and shaky. She needed to apologize, she said, for questioning Daniel about paternity. She realized now that she'd let Beverly's gossip get into her head and change how she saw things. She was ashamed she'd doubted her own son and made him feel like he needed to prove something. She kept saying I'm sorry over and over. I told her it was okay, that I understood how Beverly's constant comments could mess with people's heads. We talked for a few more minutes, and she asked if she could come visit Lily soon. I said yes. I could tell she really meant the apology. My phone buzzed with a text from Christopher about 20 minutes later. It was long, an apology for his comments about Lily's features. He admitted he was just repeating stuff he'd heard other family members saying. He wrote that he never actually believed any of it and felt terrible for joining in. He should have stood up for us, he said, instead of making Daniel feel worse. I texted back that I appreciated him saying that, and that it took guts to admit he was wrong. 2 days later, we did the DNA test. Daniel opened the kit at the kitchen table while Lily played with blocks on the floor. Instructions said to swab the inside of the cheek for 30 seconds. Daniel did his first, watching the timer on his phone. Then I held Lily still while he did hers, which was harder because she kept trying to grab the swab and bite it. We got enough cells, though, and sealed both swabs in their separate tubes. The kit came with a prepaid shipping envelope, and we walked to the post office right away to send it overnight. The lady behind the counter scanned it and said it would arrive tomorrow. The waiting period was 3 to 5 business days after they got it. Walking back to the car, Daniel grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. Neither of us said anything, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Every hour was going to feel like torture, even though we both knew what the results would say. 3 days into the waiting period, I got an email notification. Beverly's name popped up in my inbox, and my hands started shaking before I even opened it. The email was long, maybe 10 paragraphs. She called me vindictive and cruel in the first sentence. She claimed the estate situation was just a misunderstanding, and I was using it to manipulate the whole family against her. I'd always been jealous of her close relationship with grandmother, she wrote, that's why I was making up lies now. I was a terrible person for destroying family bonds over a joke that was meant to be funny. The email went on and on about how I was too sensitive and couldn't handle teasing. She accused me of turning everyone against her because I wanted attention and sympathy. By the end, she was saying I'd regret using lies to hurt her. I read it twice, my face getting hot with anger. I didn't write back. Instead, I just hit forward and sent the whole email to Dad without adding any comments. He replied in less than 5 minutes. His message said he'd already contacted the estate lawyer that morning, and they were pursuing legal action against Beverly. He wrote that Beverly was no longer welcome at any family gathering he hosted, and he'd made that clear to everyone. He told me to block her number and email so she couldn't contact me anymore. I did exactly that. The next day, Scarlett called while I was folding laundry. She asked how I was holding up after everything that happened at the party. I told her I was okay, just waiting on the DNA results and trying not to think about Beverly. Scarlett got quiet for a second, then said she needed to tell me something. Beverly had actually gotten 5 other relatives to put money into the betting pool about my marriage ending. She listed their names, and I felt sick hearing some of them, because they were people I thought liked me. Scarlett said she'd refused to participate and had even argued with Beverly about how wrong it was. But she hadn't told me before because she thought I already had enough stress. I thanked her for telling me now, and for not joining in. After we hung up, I sat on the couch, just processing the fact that 6 people in my family had been betting on my marriage falling apart. Day 4 of waiting arrived. I was feeding Lily breakfast in her high chair when Daniel came into the kitchen holding an envelope. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly. The results, he whispered. They came in the mail. I put down Lily's spoon and watched him open the envelope slowly, like he was scared of what might be inside, even though we knew. He pulled out the paper and stared at it for what felt like a full minute without moving. Then he turned it around to show me. The paper had official letterhead and a bunch of technical language I didn't understand, but right in the middle, in bold letters, it said, 99.9% probability of paternity. Daniel's eyes filled up with tears, and so did mine. We just stood there in the kitchen, crying, while Lily banged her plastic spoon on her tray and babbled at us. Daniel came over and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. Neither of us said anything for a long time. That afternoon, Daniel disappeared into the garage for about an hour. When he came back in, he was holding a simple black frame he'd bought at the store. He'd put the DNA results inside it. I asked him what he was doing, and he said he wanted to hang it in Lily's nursery. I thought it was kind of weird at first, who frames a paternity test? But he explained that he wanted a reminder of how close he came to letting someone else's poison destroy his family. Every time he walked into her room and saw that frame, he'd remember what we survived together and how we didn't let Beverly win. We hung it on the wall next to the growth chart, and Daniel stood there, looking at it for a long time. I put my arm around his waist and leaned against him. The frame looked strange hanging there amidst all the cute baby decorations, but I understood why he needed it there. 2 days later, my mom called while I was doing dishes, asking if we'd come to Sunday dinner. She needed to see us, she said, and promised Beverly wouldn't be there. Her voice sounded tired and sad when she told me she was heartbroken about everything that happened, but she believed me about the estate theft. She said I did the right thing, finally using that information to protect my family. I told her we'd come, and she sounded relieved. That Sunday, we drove to my parents' house with Lily in her car seat, babbling the whole way. Daniel seemed nervous, kept adjusting his grip on the steering wheel. When we walked in, about a dozen relatives were already there. My dad stood up as soon as he saw us and hugged me tight. Then he asked everyone to sit down because he had something important to say. The room got quiet, people stopped passing dishes. Dad cleared his throat and announced that he'd filed a formal complaint with the police about the forged checks Beverly wrote from grandmother's accounts. Several cousins gasped, and my Aunt Sarah put her hand over her mouth, but my uncle nodded like he'd been expecting this, and Scarlett squeezed my hand under the table. Dad said he had copies of everything, and the police were taking it seriously. My mom started crying quietly, and Daniel put his arm around my shoulders. The next afternoon, I was folding laundry when my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, and heard a woman crying so hard she could barely talk. She said her name, and I realized it was Beverly's daughter. She begged me to drop the theft charges, saying her mother made a mistake but didn't deserve to go to jail. I sat down on the couch, my legs feeling shaky. I told her, as gently as I could, that I wasn't pressing charges. My father was, and it was out of my hands now. She kept crying, saying her mom had problems, but she was still her mom. I said I understood that, but Beverly had had a whole year to stop attacking my family, and she chose to keep going. Beverly's daughter said I was being cruel and hung up on me. I sat there, holding the phone, feeling sick to my stomach, even though I knew I'd done nothing wrong. That night, after Lily went to bed, Daniel and I were sitting on the couch watching TV when he muted it suddenly. He turned to me and said he thought we should start seeing a marriage counselor. My stomach dropped. I worried he was going to say he wanted a divorce. But he explained that the DNA test proved biology and genetics, but it didn't automatically fix the fact that he doubted me for months. He said those doubts had done damage, and we needed help working through it. I felt relieved and scared at the same time. I told him I thought that was a good idea, and he squeezed my hand. He'd already looked up a few counselors who specialized in family issues and trust problems. We made an appointment for the following week. The first counseling session felt awkward from the moment we sat down. The counselor, a woman in her 50s, asked us to explain why we were there. Daniel started, admitting he felt ashamed of his doubts about Lily's paternity. His voice cracked when he said he hated himself for letting Beverly's poison get into his head. Then it was my turn. I said I resented him for not defending me more strongly to his family. I told the counselor I felt alone dealing with Beverly's attacks while Daniel stayed quiet or avoided family events. The counselor listened patiently to both of us. She said these were completely normal feelings after what we'd been through. Trust damage takes time to heal, she explained, and we shouldn't expect everything to be fixed immediately just because we had proof. She gave us some exercises to do at home about communicating our feelings without blaming each other. When we left, I felt exhausted, but also a little hopeful. 2 weeks after the birthday party disaster, Daniel got a text from Beverly's husband, asking if we could all sit down and have a conversation. Daniel showed me the message and asked what I thought. Absolutely not, I said, but reminded him it was his decision too. Daniel texted back that Beverly wasn't safe for our family right now, and we needed space. His hands were shaking while he typed it. Beverly's husband sent back a long message saying Beverly was struggling and felt terrible. Daniel turned his phone off without responding. He told me he was done making excuses for people who hurt us. I hugged him, proud of him for setting that boundary. 3 days later, my dad called me, sounding angry. The estate lawyer had contacted him with new findings about Beverly's theft. She'd actually taken closer to $22,000 over 6 months, not the $15,000 I'd originally found. The lawyer had bank records proving Beverly systematically drained grandmother's accounts while claiming to help with her bills. She'd forged signatures and made electronic transfers to her own account. My dad said he felt sick knowing his own sister had stolen from their dying mother. The police were treating it as a serious felony case now because of the amount. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened while he talked through his anger and sadness. Over the next few days, several relatives who'd been in Beverly's betting pool started sending me awkward apology texts. One cousin said she thought it was just a harmless joke and didn't realize how much damage it was causing. Another aunt texted that she felt terrible and wanted to make it right. I read each message but didn't respond to most. I was still too angry that they'd participated in something so cruel, even if they claimed they thought it was harmless. They'd been betting actual money on my marriage falling apart. Scarlett called to tell me she'd heard two of them were trying to pressure me into accepting their apologies. I told her I'd forgive them when I was ready, and not before. She said that was completely fair, and she'd run interference if anyone bothered me about it. By our fourth counseling session, Daniel and I had made some progress, but hit a wall during one discussion. The counselor asked Daniel what was holding him back from fully trusting again. He got quiet for a long time, then finally admitted he'd been struggling with feeling like a fool. He thought everyone must think he was stupid for not seeing through Beverly's lies sooner. The counselor leaned forward and told him that being manipulated by a sustained campaign of lies doesn't make him stupid. She explained that Beverly had been deliberately and systematically working to destroy his confidence for over a year. She said falling for manipulation makes him human, not foolish, especially when it came from family he was supposed to trust. Daniel started crying, and I reached over to hold his hand. That session felt like a real breakthrough because he'd been carrying that shame silently. At the end of that same session, the counselor turned to me and asked if there was anything I felt guilty about. I hesitated, not wanting to admit it out loud. But finally, I confessed that part of me had enjoyed threatening Beverly with the estate information. I felt guilty, I said, about using what felt like blackmail tactics, even thug. She deserved consequences for what she'd done. The counselor nodded and said it was completely okay to have complicated feelings about standing up for yourself. Using information to protect my family from ongoing harm wasn't the same as blackmail for personal gain, she said. I could acknowledge that standing up to Beverly felt good, while also recognizing it wasn't my proudest moment. That helped me feel less conflicted about the whole confrontation. The next week, my mom showed up on Tuesday morning with grocery bags and a determined look on her face. She said she'd be coming over every Tuesday from now on to spend time with Lily and help around the house. I started to protest, but she held up her hand. I need to do this, she said. She unpacked the groceries while Lily played with blocks. Mom picked up Lily and sat on the couch with her, just watching her stack the blocks and knock them down. After about 20 minutes, Mom looked at me. She'd been thinking a lot about Beverly's comments from the beginning. She admitted she'd told me to ignore Beverly at that first gathering when Lily was only 3 weeks old. Mom wished she'd shut Beverly down harder right from the start instead of treating it like harmless family nonsense. She'd spent years trying to keep peace in the family by minimizing problems, and she was done with that approach. I sat down next to her and told her I understood why she'd reacted that way. Mom shook her head. Understanding doesn't make it right. I should have protected you and Daniel better. She came back the following Tuesday, and every Tuesday after that. Sometimes she'd bring lunch, sometimes she'd just play with Lily while I caught up on laundry or took a shower without rushing. It became this steady, comforting thing I could count on. 2 weeks after Mom started her Tuesday visits, Kayla called Daniel and asked if we'd come to dinner at their house on Saturday. Daniel asked if this was about Beverly, and Kayla said yes. His whole family wanted to talk to us. I could see Daniel tense up on the couch while he listened to his mom. He told her we'd think about it and call her back. After he hung up, we sat there for a while. Finally, Daniel said he thought we should go. His family owed us an actual apology, and this seemed like they were trying to give one. I agreed, but told him we'd leave the second anyone made excuses for their behavior. Saturday came, and we drove to Kayla's house with Lily in her car seat. Daniel's brother Christopher answered the door and immediately said he was glad we came. The whole family was there. Kayla had made a big meal with Daniel's favorite foods. We all sat down, and it was incredibly awkward at first, everyone just passing dishes in silence. Then Kayla put down her fork and looked directly at both of us. She needed to say something formal and important, she said. Daniel's family, she explained, had failed to trust his judgment and support his marriage when he needed them most. Kayla said they'd let Beverly's rumors influence them instead of believing in Daniel's character and integrity. She apologized for questioning him about paternity and for making him feel like his own mother doubted him. Christopher jumped in and apologized for his comments about Lily's features and for repeating gossip instead of supporting his brother. Daniel's dad, who'd been quiet, said he was ashamed he hadn't stepped in to stop the family from piling on. The dinner lasted 3 hours, uncomfortable the entire time, but I could tell everyone meant what they were saying. On the drive home, Daniel said it felt necessary, even though it was painful to sit through. The following week, my dad called and asked me to meet him for coffee. I left Lily with Daniel and met Dad at a coffee shop near our house. He looked tired. We got our drinks and sat in a corner booth. Dad told me that Beverly had been formally charged with felony theft and forgery related to the estate fraud. The prosecutor had looked at all the bank records and forged signatures and decided this was a serious case worth pursuing. I asked him if he was okay with Beverly facing criminal charges. Dad was quiet for a minute. Then he said he'd actually pushed for the charges to be filed. Beverly needed to face real consequences, he said, not just family disapproval or people being mad at her. Without legal consequences, Beverly would just wait for everything to blow over and then go back to her old behavior. I told him I felt conflicted about the whole legal route, even though I knew Beverly deserved punishment. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Dad said he understood my conflict, but this was bigger than just what Beverly did to my marriage. She'd stolen from their dying mother and betrayed the family's trust in the worst possible way. The charges were filed, and Beverly would have to answer for that in court. I asked if he thought she'd go to jail. Dad said he didn't know, but he hoped she'd at least get probation and have to pay restitution. Our counseling sessions continued every week, and slowly, things started shifting between Daniel and me. The counselor gave us homework about rebuilding intimacy through small daily actions instead of trying to fix everything at once. Daniel took the assignment seriously. He started leaving me notes in random places, in my coat pocket, tucked into the bathroom mirror, stuck to the coffee maker. The notes would say things like why he loved me or what he appreciated about me that day. One said he loved how patient I was with Lily even when I was exhausted. Another said he was grateful I'd fought for our family when he'd been too beaten down to fight himself. I made an effort to be more open about my feelings instead of trying to handle everything alone, like I usually did. When I felt overwhelmed, I told him instead of just pushing through. When I was scared about the Beverly situation, I talked to him about it instead of keeping it inside. The counselor said these small changes were building new patterns of trust and communication. It felt awkward at first, because we'd gotten so used to just surviving and managing crises, but after a few weeks, it started feeling more natural. Daniel would ask me how I was really doing, and I'd actually tell him the truth. I'd ask him what he needed from me, and he'd be honest about it. We were learning how to be a team again, instead of two people just trying to get through each day. 3 months after the birthday party confrontation, my dad called with news about Beverly's case. She'd taken a plea deal and pleaded guilty to reduced charges. Instead of felony theft, they'd reduced it to a lesser charge in exchange for her guilty plea. Beverly got 2 years probation, had to pay full restitution of the $22,000 she'd stolen, and complete 200 hours of community service. Dad said the criminal record was what really mattered because it created official consequences for her actions. I asked if he'd talked to Beverly at all. He said no, and he didn't plan to anytime soon. Dad told me Beverly's daughter had called him, crying and begging him to forgive Beverly. But he told her that forgiveness would take time, and Beverly needed to focus on her legal consequences right now. The plea deal meant no trial, which was a relief because none of us wanted to testify in court. But it also meant Beverly had admitted, in an official legal setting, that she'd stolen from our grandmother. That admission felt important somehow, like it made everything real and documented instead of just family drama. My cousin's wedding was scheduled for late September. When the invitation arrived, Daniel looked at it and asked if I thought Beverly would be there. I called my cousin directly. She told me Beverly wasn't invited and wouldn't be attending any family events for the foreseeable future. Too many people were still angry and hurt by what Beverly had done. The wedding was beautiful. The reception had good food and music. What struck me most was how relaxed everyone seemed. Usually, at family gatherings, there was this underlying tension. People watching what they said, being careful. But without Beverly there, stirring things up, everyone just enjoyed themselves. Multiple relatives came up to us, saying how nice it was to see Daniel at a family event again. One aunt told me she'd forgotten how much fun these gatherings could be without drama. Daniel actually stayed for the entire reception. He danced with me, and with Lily. He talked to my cousins and laughed at my uncle's bad jokes. On the drive home, he said that was the first family event in over a year where he didn't spend the whole time wanting to leave early. He'd actually enjoyed himself and remembered why he liked my family in the first place. Lily started taking her first real steps a few weeks after the wedding. She'd been cruising along furniture for a while. But one Tuesday, when my mom was over, Lily just let go of the coffee table and walked 5 steps to Mom's outstretched arms. Mom started crying, calling for me to come see. Daniel got home from work 20 minutes later, and Mom made Lily do it again. Daniel scooped her up and spun her around, completely present in the moment, without any shadow of doubt on his face. Over the next few weeks, Lily started saying more words, too. She'd been saying mama and dada for months, but now she added words like ball and dog and juice. Daniel was there for all of it, celebrating every new word and every wobbly step. One night, I was watching him play with Lily on the living room floor, making her giggle by pretending to steal her toy and give it back. His face was completely relaxed and happy. I realized in that moment just how much damage Beverly had actually caused. For months, Daniel had looked at Lily with this tension in his expression, this question mark hanging over everything. Now that was completely gone, and he could just be her dad without any of that poison in his head. The difference was so clear, it almost made me cry. My relationship with Scarlett had gotten stronger through all of this. She called me at least once a week just to check in, and we'd started meeting for lunch every other week. One afternoon, we met at a sandwich shop. After we ordered, Scarlett told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking about toxic family members in her own life. Watching what happened with Beverly had made her realize she needed better boundaries. She admitted she had an uncle who constantly made inappropriate comments, and she'd always just laughed it off to keep the peace. She said she was done with that approach and had actually called her uncle out at a recent family dinner. I asked how that went, and she said it was uncomfortable but necessary. Scarlett told me that seeing me stand up to Beverly had inspired her to stop tolerating bad behavior just because it came from family. We talked about how hard it is to set boundaries with relatives because there's so much pressure to just get along and not make waves. She was grateful our friendship had grown from all this mess, even though she wished it hadn't taken such an awful situation to bring us closer. One Thursday evening, Daniel told me to clear my schedule for the following weekend. He'd planned a getaway for just the two of us, and my mom had already agreed to watch Lily. I asked where we were going, but he said it was a surprise. Friday after work, we packed overnight bags and drove 2 hours to a bed and breakfast in the mountains. The place was small and quiet, with a view of the valley. Daniel said he'd been planning this for weeks because we needed time to remember who we were as a couple, not just as parents defending their family from attacks. We checked in and went to dinner. It felt strange at first, being without Lily, like we'd forgotten how to just be Daniel and me. But by the time dessert came, we were actually relaxing and talking about things that had nothing to do with Beverly or family drama or legal cases. We talked about places we wanted to travel someday, books we'd been meaning to read. We remembered inside jokes from when we first started dating. That night, we stayed up late just talking in a way we hadn't in years. Saturday morning, we had breakfast on the porch, then went for a hike. The fall leaves were changing colors, the air cool and clear. About halfway through the hike, we sat on a bench overlooking the valley. Daniel started talking about his dad, and how his father had always avoided conflict no matter what. He'd been scared, he said, of becoming that kind of person, someone who just stayed quiet while bad things happened around him. He felt like he'd almost become his dad during the whole Beverly situation, just withdrawing and hoping it would go away instead of fighting back. I told him about my own fears of being walked over the way my mom sometimes was in family situations. I admitted I'd always seen my mom as someone who prioritized peace over standing up for herself, and I'd been terrified of becoming that person. We talked about how we both came into this marriage carrying our parents' patterns and fears. Daniel said the counseling had helped him see that he could choose to be different, that he didn't have to repeat his father's mistakes. I said I'd learned I could set boundaries and fight for my family without becoming bitter or cruel like Beverly. We sat on that bench for over an hour, having the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Daniel held my hand and told me he was scared sometimes that he'd damaged our marriage too much with his doubts. I told him I was scared, too, but I believed we could build something stronger than what we had before. We hiked back to the inn and spent the rest of the day just being together. Sunday morning, we drove home feeling more connected than we had in months. Our counselor smiled when we told her about the weekend trip at our next session. She said we'd done the hard work of not just surviving a crisis, but actually using it to build something stronger than what we had before. Daniel squeezed my hand during that session, and I felt this sense of relief that we'd actually made it through the worst part. 2 days later, an envelope arrived from a law office. I didn't recognize. Inside was a typed letter from Beverly, saying she wanted to apologize and asking if she could be part of Lily's life again. The letter was formal and careful, probably written by her lawyer, and it made my stomach turn just seeing her name. Daniel and I brought it to our next counseling appointment and spent the whole hour talking about whether we were ready to even consider letting her back in. The counselor asked us what we needed to feel safe, and neither of us had a good answer because the truth was, Beverly had broken something that couldn't be fixed with a letter. Daniel said he didn't trust her and probably never would, and I agreed. We decided together that we weren't ready for contact with Beverly, and we might never be ready, and that was okay. My father called me the following week and asked if I wanted to get coffee. We met at a place near his office. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. He told me he'd been thinking a lot about his relationship with Beverly and how it was probably damaged beyond repair. I started to say something about how maybe they could work it out, but he stopped me. Protecting his granddaughter and supporting his daughter mattered more than maintaining family peace at any cost. He'd spent too many years making excuses for Beverly's behavior, he said, and he was done with that. I cried a little bit right there in the coffee shop, because I'd never heard my dad talk like that before. He hugged me and said he was proud of me for standing up to Beverly, even though it was hard. For months after the confrontation at Lily's first birthday, Daniel and I had our final scheduled counseling session. The counselor said we could always come back if we needed to, but we'd developed healthy communication tools and rebuilt our foundation of trust. She said most couples who go through what we went through either break up or stay together but never truly heal, and we'd done the actual healing work. Daniel thanked her for helping us find our way back to each other. I felt grateful that we'd been willing to do the hard work instead of just pretending everything was fine. We started planning Lily's second birthday party the next week. And this time, we were very careful about the guest list. We only invited people who had supported us through the crisis, which made it smaller than last year's disaster, but so much better. My parents were coming. Daniel's mom, Kayla, was coming. Christopher and his new girlfriend, Scarlett, and her family, and a few other relatives who had stood by us. No one who had participated in Beverly's betting pool got an invitation. No one who had made Daniel feel like he needed to question his own daughter got invited. The party was just going to be about celebrating Lily with people who actually loved her. The morning of the party, Daniel helped me set up decorations while Lily played with her toys. We hung streamers and balloons, and I made a cake with red frosting to match her beautiful red hair. People started arriving around noon, and the house filled up with warmth and laughter in a way it hadn't the year before. Everyone brought gifts and hugs, and no one made a single joke about paternity or hair color or anything else. Kayla spent 20 minutes on the floor playing blocks with Lily, and I watched Daniel watching them with this peaceful expression on his face. About an hour into the party, Daniel tapped his glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. He gave a short toast, thanking everyone for standing by our family during a difficult time. He didn't mention Beverly by name, but everyone understood what he meant, and several relatives raised their glasses with visible emotion in their eyes. My mom wiped tears away, and my dad put his arm around her shoulders. Christopher stood up and added that he was grateful to be part of a family that knew how to support each other when it really mattered. Then it was time for cake. We brought Lily to her high chair with the red frosted cake in front of her. She looked at it for about 2 seconds before smashing both hands right into the middle of it. Red frosting went everywhere, all over her face, her hair, her clothes. Everyone laughed and took pictures. I caught Daniel watching her with pure joy and zero doubt on his face. And that moment felt like the real victory. Not the confrontation with Beverly, or the legal consequences, or even the DNA test. Just Daniel looking at our daughter, covered in cake, and seeing nothing but love. My mother pulled me aside while Daniel was helping Lily get cleaned up. She told me she was proud of how I'd fought for my family. She'd been thinking about times in her own life when she should have been more assertive, and I'd inspired her to work on that. I hugged her and told her it meant a lot to hear her say that. Christopher came over with a woman I'd never met before, and he introduced her as his girlfriend, Joyce. He told her this was his niece, Lily, the smartest and cutest kid in the whole family. Daniel caught my eye across the room and smiled, and I knew he'd heard it, too. After everyone left and we'd said our goodbyes, Daniel and I cleaned up together while Lily napped. We picked up wrapping paper, put away leftover food, wiped frosting off the walls. Daniel said this birthday felt completely different from last year, and I agreed. He told me he was grateful we'd gone through hell together, because now he knew our marriage could survive anything. I said I felt the same way, and we finished cleaning in comfortable silence, just being together in our home with our daughter sleeping safely nearby. A few weeks after the party, Beverly's daughter called while I was doing laundry. I let it go to voicemail at first, but she called back twice, so I answered. She asked if we could talk about letting her kids spend time with Lily, since they were cousins and shouldn't be punished for their grandmother's behavior. I told her I understood where she was coming from, but we needed to protect our peace right now. She asked how long that might take. Honestly, I said, I don't know. Maybe someday, but not today. She was quiet for a minute, then said she understood and hoped we could work toward it eventually. After we hung up, I felt guilty, but also relieved that I'd held the boundary without caving to pressure. Daniel came home from work the next Tuesday with a huge smile on his face. He picked up Lily and spun her around, then kissed me and said he got the promotion he'd been hoping for. His boss told him during the review that his communication skills had improved dramatically over the past 6 months. Daniel said he'd actually mentioned the counseling in a general way, talking about how working on personal growth had helped him professionally. That night after Lily went to bed, Daniel told me the whole nightmare with Beverly had taught him to stand up for himself in all areas of his life. He used to avoid conflict at work, too, just like he did with family. But counseling showed him how to be direct without being aggressive. The following Sunday, we tried out a parents' group at OU, our church that someone had mentioned to us. About 8 couples sat in a circle in the church basement with coffee and donuts. The facilitator asked everyone to share one family challenge they were navigating. We heard about in-laws who ignored boundaries, parents who played favorites with grandchildren, siblings who caused drama at every gathering. When it was our turn, I gave a brief version of what happened with Beverly without using her name. 3 different people nodded like they'd experienced something similar. After the meeting, 2 couples came up to talk to us more, and we exchanged numbers. Daniel said on the drive home that it felt good to know we weren't the only ones dealing with complicated family stuff. My parents invited us over for dinner a few days later. Dad grilled burgers while Mom and I made salad, and Lily played in their backyard. Over dinner, Dad brought up Beverly without me having to prompt it. He'd been thinking a lot about how he handled things over the years. He wished he'd addressed Beverly's behavior a long time ago instead of staying silent and enabling it. Mom agreed, saying she felt the same way, that they'd both chosen peace over protection. I told them I understood why they did it, that confronting family is hard. Dad said watching me stand up to Beverly showed him it was possible to set boundaries without destroying yourself in the process. The conversation felt different from our usual surface-level small talk, more honest and real. I ran into one of the relatives who'd been in Beverly's betting pool at the grocery store the next week. She was in the produce section and saw me before I saw her. She walked over, looking nervous, and said she'd been hoping to talk to me. She apologized again for participating in the betting pool, saying she felt terrible about it. This time, instead of walking away, I actually listened. I told her I accepted her apology and hoped she learned something about how gossip that seems harmless can actually destroy people. She nodded and said she definitely had, that she'd been thinking about it constantly. We talked for a few more minutes. It wasn't comfortable, but it felt necessary. That evening, Daniel and I were cleaning up after dinner when he brought up the idea of having another baby. I stopped loading the dishwasher and looked at him. He'd been thinking about it for a while, he said, and felt like we were in a good place now. For the first time since Lily was born, I wasn't immediately worried about what color hair another baby might have or what anyone might say. I told Daniel that, and he grinned. He hoped they had red hair, too, just to make a point. We both laughed and agreed we'd start trying in a few months once we felt completely ready. Christmas came, and a card arrived in the mail with Beverly's return address. Daniel brought it in from the mailbox, and we both stared at it on the kitchen counter. He asked if I wanted to open it, and I said no. We'd talked about this in counseling. Any contact with Beverly had to be on our terms and timeline, not hers. We weren't ready yet, and might never be ready. Daniel put the card in a drawer, unopened, and we went on with our day. Kayla started coming over every Thursday evening to watch Lily while Daniel and I went to dinner or just took a walk. She'd arrive with little gifts for Lily and spend hours playing with her on the floor. One Thursday, she stayed after we got home and asked to talk to me privately. We sat in the kitchen while Daniel gave Lily a bath. Kayla told me she was ashamed of how she'd acted when Beverly first started spreading rumors. She was grateful I was giving her another chance to be part of Lily's life. I told her I appreciated the apology and that watching her with Lily now showed me she genuinely changed. Our anniversary fell on a Saturday in January. Daniel had planned a nice dinner at home after Lily went to sleep. He cooked my favorite meal, and we ate by candlelight. After dessert, he pulled out a small wrapped box. Inside was a necklace with Lily's birthstone hanging from a delicate chain. He said this past year had taught him that I was the strongest person he knew. I told him that standing up to Beverly had been terrifying, but knowing he had my back made it possible. We sat together on the couch afterward, just holding hands and talking about how far we'd come. The next weekend, we drove to the cemetery where my grandmother was buried. It was cold and gray, but not raining. We bundled Lily up in her winter coat and walked across the grass to grandmother's headstone. Daniel held Lily while I told grandmother about her great-granddaughter, who had her beautiful red hair. Lily reached out and touched the cold stone with her little hand. Daniel held my other hand the whole time, and I felt like grandmother would be proud of how we'd protected our family. We stayed for a few more minutes, then walked back to the car with Lily between us, each of us holding one of her hands while she tried to jump over puddles. 6 months later, my dad called. Beverly was moving to another state to live near her daughter, and he thought it was probably for the best. I asked if he'd talked to her, and he said no, he'd heard it through my uncle. Dad said the family gatherings had been much healthier without her there, and everyone seemed more relaxed. He told me he was proud of how Daniel and I had handled everything, and that standing up to Beverly was the right thing, even though it was hard. I thanked him, and we talked for a few more minutes about Lily and work before hanging up. Daniel got home that evening, and I told him about Beverly moving away. He nodded slowly. Good, he said. Maybe now his family can stop walking on eggshells, wondering if she'll show up somewhere. We decided to celebrate our progress by going out that weekend, just the two of us. Kayla agreed to watch Lily. We drove to our favorite restaurant downtown. We made a rule before we even sat down, no talking about Beverly, or any family drama at all. Daniel ordered wine, and we spent the whole dinner laughing about silly things, like the weird guy at his office who microwaves fish every day, and the time I accidentally dyed my hair orange in college. He told me about wanting to take Lily camping next summer, and I reminded him about the time he got lost on a marked trail for 3 hours. We held hands across the table, and I felt like we were dating again instead of just surviving together. On the drive home, Daniel said he felt like we'd finally moved past survival mode into actually thriving, and I agreed completely. The next Tuesday, I was making lunch when my phone buzzed with a text from Scarlett. She'd sent a photo of Lily playing with her kids at a family picnic I'd missed because of work. Lily was laughing in the grass, her bright red hair catching the sunlight. And Scarlett's caption said, "Look at this beautiful red-headed angel." I stared at that message for a long time, because it was such a simple thing, but it meant everything. A year ago, people were questioning whether Lily was even Daniel's child. And now everyone was celebrating exactly who she was. I saved the photo and showed it to Daniel when he got home. That night after dinner, I rocked Lily in her nursery while she fought sleep, like she always did. I watched her red curls stick to her forehead and thought about how this whole nightmare had actually brought Daniel and me closer together. We'd learned to protect our family fiercely and stand up against people who tried to hurt us. We were genuinely happy now, in a way that felt solid and real. Our marriage was stronger than it had ever been because we'd been tested and came through it together. Lily was growing up surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally, for exactly who she was. I kissed her forehead as her eyes finally closed and realized that sometimes, the best outcome isn't perfect justice or fairy tale endings. Sometimes it's just peace and healing, and a family that learned to stand together against toxicity. Ending, it took a malicious joke, a public humiliation, and digging up a dark family secret, but we finally found our peace. We found our strength. And in the process, we became the family we were always meant to be. Have you ever had to draw a difficult line with a toxic family member, even when it felt like you were betraying a lifelong bond? What was that like for you? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.